It was a Sunday early in the morning. I live in the suburbs, but my parents own a farm that I enjoy going to because I get to see my dog. Her name is Molly. She's a mutt, but she is not a tiny dog by any means. At that time, I felt very safe around her and would often take her for walks in a forest nearby. The day started off like any other. My dad and I got in the car, drove around for a while, and arrived at the farm. I immediately got out of the car and hugged Molly. My parents always got angry when I hugged her since I would smell like her for the rest of the day. I put her leash on and asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. He always thought that we would just go down a road and back, but I always found it more interesting to take her to the forest. I always felt a certain kind of peace and relaxation there, unmatched by anything else. So we took a turn and headed to the forest. Usually when we got there, I'd take her leash off so she could explore on her own. Most of the time, I'd carve my name into the trees or look for anything interesting. I was playing baseball with some rocks and a wooden leg, presumably from an old table, when I heard it. Molly was barking at something. This was unusual when we were in the forest. I thought it was a fox or some other animal, so I quickly grabbed the wooden leg like a weapon. I knew that if it was a fox, I wouldn't attack it, but I had a sense of security while I was holding it. I called out, "Molly, Molly," but she just kept barking. This was very strange for me since she always came to me when I called her. I followed the sound of her barks and stumbled across a scene I'll never forget. There was a man, probably in his late 50s, half naked, carrying a large machete in one hand and holding a bottle of moonshine in the other. This was the first time I stumbled across someone in the woods, let alone someone half naked and carrying a big machete. He was completely ignoring Molly and hacking away at the ground for some reason. I didn't really know how to handle the situation. Even now, I have no idea how I would handle it. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked in confusion. I don't think I understood the seriousness of the situation at the time. He turned around, revealing his face. He had some of the clearest blue eyes I have ever seen to this day. I could see them so well because they were open wide. "Come here, boy, look what I've dug up." I was afraid that if I didn't listen to him, he would start chasing after me, and that was something I wanted to avoid at all costs. I got closer but kept a good distance. I didn't see anything except for an empty hole. He returned to hitting the ground with his machete, occasionally taking sips from the bottle. I used this window of time to get my dog and started walking away slowly so as not to notify him that I was leaving. But then I took one final glance at the man. His head was dug deep in the hole. I was intrigued, so I kept looking. I know how stupid of me. He finally got up from the ground. I was shocked when I saw him carrying a bone in his mouth. I have no idea what animal it belonged to, if it even belonged to an animal. I had seen enough and started sprinting with my dog. As we ran, I heard him laughing, and then I saw something flying from the corner of my eye. It was that damn machete. I heard him yell, "Damn it!" This made me run even faster. I know the forest very well, so I wasn't afraid of getting lost. I ripped through branches and bushes until I got out of that forest. But I didn't stop sprinting until I arrived at the garage, where my father was testing out lights on our tractor. I didn't tell him a single thing about the man since I was afraid that he'd get angry and wouldn't allow me to walk Molly anymore. Needless to say, I never went to that forest alone ever again. Man with the machete and a bone in his mouth. Let's not meet again. I'm a 24-year-old female living in the United Kingdom. Despite a few creepy instances as a child, there has only been one time in my adult life that I have truly felt primal fear. My apology if it's a little long, but trust me, I am being as concise as possible and need to explain the surroundings a little at first. I live in a village in the middle of the English countryside. To paint an accurate picture of its size, it has a population of 4,000, but feels more like 1,000 due to its spread out nature and being surrounded on all sides by lots of fields, farms, and woods that eventually connect to a pretty famous forest. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and because of this has notoriously bad phone and internet connections. Having lived here all my life, I know the place like the back of my hand. I know where all the public footpaths through the woods and fields are, where they connect, which are shortcuts, where to cross deep streams, and so on. I have gone on walks in this area throughout my childhood with my parents and alone as an adult. Nothing bad had happened. I felt safe here. This story takes place last summer in July after I moved back home from university, had yet to get a job, and smoked a lot of weed. A habit my parents despised and which I tried to keep hidden from them by going for evening walks. Multiple pre-rolled joints hidden away in my hoodie pocket. As usual, this day they both got home at 5 p.m. We had dinner but chatted for a while longer than usual as my mom had had quite a hectic day and was telling me about it. Because of this, I ended up heading out for my walk an hour later than routine, around 7 p.m. But as it was summer, the sun was still shining, so honestly I didn't really notice that it would start getting dark while I was still out. The woodland closest to my house is less than 5 minutes away, and you enter through a gate into a farmer's field. You can see across the open area quite far until the first set of small woods obscures your view. That's where I was heading, as I knew this track takes under 2 hours and leads back onto the same path I was standing on now. More than enough time to smoke the 3 joints in my pocket and for the smell to leave my clothing, I had thought. This entire area is very popular for dog walkers, so it's not unusual to see other people while you're about. And as this is a village, everybody says hello to everybody. I lit my first joint and started walking. I'm just in my own world for a while until I was less than 100 feet before the entrance to the woods. An elderly man was coming out of them, throwing a ball for his collie dog. I finished my joint and stubbed it out. As I got closer, I recognized it was John, who lived on the road next to mine and knew my grandpa. We stopped and said hello as I stroked his dog Max. While talking, I saw another man coming out of the woods. No dog, bright green jacket. Very tall and had a good 10 years on me age-wise. Me and John chatted for another minute and said goodbye. He warned me not to stay out here too long as it would start getting dark soon. True, the sky was bright pink and orange. The sun was indeed beginning to set. I hadn't really noticed. I continued on down the path toward the man. When we were nearly passing each other, I looked up to make brief eye contact, smiled, and said hello. Like everyone here does, even if you don't recognize the person. My eyes instantly met his. He was already looking at me, his dark eyes locked on mine. He wasn't smiling. I didn't know him at all, but I knew something was wrong. It was in his eyes. I swallowed my politeness and looked at the ground as we passed. I had lived in my university city the past couple of years, so I knew a red flag when I saw one, and my country bumpkin manners evaporated. I quickened my pace a little and, before entering the woods, slyly looked back. The guy was still walking in the same direction, following John. I felt relieved, laughed, cursed the weed for making me paranoid while lighting up another joint, and started walking into the woods. It takes about 30 minutes to follow the path through the woods to the end. The pathway exit opened into another field that led to another set of woods. The sky was now violet, the dimming light having been obscured to me by the trees. I was already smoking my last joint, and was near the entrance to the second set of woods, when I felt it, Fear. Complete, crippling, absolute fear worked its way like electricity through every layer of flesh. I'd never felt anything like it before or since, but I knew what it was. I whipped around. Standing at the exit of the first set of woods was the man. I could still make out his green jacket in the fading light. He had doubled back, and very quickly too. I had looked back several times while in those trees, and he hadn't been there. For a second I froze, as did he. He knew I'd seen. To sprint the distance between us would take him about 5 minutes. He was obviously in good shape. I threw the spliff and bolted into the woods, the only way I could go. I didn't dare look behind me. I sprinted for a couple of minutes before taking a sharp left turn off the path into the trees, hoping to throw him off a bit, but I couldn't see a thing. The light was already darkening, and the trees made it 100 times worse, especially as I was now in the thick of them. Their branches caught on my clothes like fingers, whipping and scratching my bare legs so badly I bled. I ran and ran, my lungs protesting in pain, hating me for smoking so much while my heart was throwing itself against my ribcage, trying to escape. I couldn't anymore. I threw myself on the ground behind a particularly thick trunk. My back against it, knees to my chest, hand thrown over my mouth to stifle my labored breathing, desperately trying to pump air into my lungs for the next sprint. I listened for the first time. A few seconds passed silently. Then I heard him. Heavy footfalls snapping twigs behind me and about 20 feet to my left. I dared not look in case he saw me. I had my phone but knew I had little chance of signal being where I was, and I knew he'd either hear me talking or see the light from the display. I'm not ashamed to say at this point I started to cry. The tears fell silently down my cheeks. "What the hell?" I heard a deep voice exclaim. "Where are you? I know you're here. I saw you." I had to clasp both hands across my mouth to stop my scream escaping. I could hear him moving around. I panicked and found enough courage to slowly peek from behind the tree. He was about 10 feet behind me, less than 20 feet to the left, with his back to me. I moved back and my eyes searched the area around me. I picked up a pretty heavy rock. I carefully checked on him again. His back was still turned, but he was searching through the trees, hunched down lower to the ground now. I made a snap decision, and with everything I had left, I threw the rock behind me and to the right. It clattered through the branches of the trees and made one hell of a noise. I watched him immediately bolt in its direction, laughing. I paused a little, hearing his footsteps get quieter until I thought I wouldn't be so visible to him if I moved and threw myself forward. I ran, trying to put as much distance between us as possible, but I was also aware that I was getting further and further away from home. I knew there had to be a stream somewhere close. If I found the stream, I could follow it as it borders the land and ran parallel to some of the footpaths. I ran until the trees finally cleared, and I could just make out another field through them on the other side. I thanked God and pushed myself a little bit further until I was out of the trees and the ground disappeared from below my feet, and I went head over shoulders down the stream embankment. I crashed into the water below, my open mouth and lungs filling with muddy water. As I spluttered it out, I felt both relieved to have found the stream and terrified he'd heard me. My phone was now ruined. I slowly made my way downstream as quietly as possible, listening out for him the whole time as the stream bordered the woods, looking up periodically just in case. After a while, maybe half an hour, I noticed the trees began to thin out and realized this was the edge of the woods where I would have been exiting and where the pathway connected to the original one I'd started on. If I ran, I could get home in less than 20 minutes. As quietly as I could, I dragged myself on my stomach back up the embankment army style, wanting to stay as low as possible. I peeked over the top. I could just make out the opening of the woods exit path about 50 feet away. I sat and scanned the forest line for a couple of minutes, my eyes trying to make out movement despite it now being pitch black. Nothing. I couldn't hear anything either. I pushed myself up and sprinted as fast as I could across the field onto the pathway. I knew the gate I'd entered through was in the adjoining field. It really wasn't far. I was so happy. "You bitch!" came a screech from across the field. I swear my legs nearly gave out then and there. He had been waiting for me. I turned my head and saw him sprinting out of the woods at full pelt. I screamed and pushed myself further, tears coating my face. All I could do was run. I crossed into the main field now, and I could see the moonlight shining off the metal gate. My house was just 5 minutes away after that. I have never focused on anything as much as that gate. He was faster than me and getting closer, screaming at me the whole time about how he was going to slit my throat. I ran and ran, pushing myself up and over the gate, and ran up the road. I dared to look as I made the turning for my road. He was still following me. I raced up my driveway and threw myself through the door, running into the living room, crying and screaming hysterically, pointing behind me towards the door. My dad ran outside while my mom grabbed hold of me as I collapsed, shaking. As it turns out, my parents had already called the police. As I said, I was going out for an hour or so at 7, and it was now past midnight, and I hadn't answered when they had called my now broke phone. Very unlike me. We called the police again to explain. They came and I gave a full statement. Both my parents and the police were horrified. Nothing like this happens here. There hasn't been a reported sexual assault or murder in the last 100 years. But one look at me and it was obvious I was telling the truth. I was covered head to toe in cuts and bruises, soaking wet and covered in mud and blood. I won't go into how this experience changed me. It's depressing. But I will say the thing that scares me the most is that they never even had a suspect. Despite him following me so closely, he was gone by the time my dad ran outside. That guy is still out there, and who knows what he is really capable of. I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and me and my childhood friend Joe were outside all the time we could manage it. Joe lived on a farm that bordered a pretty big forest, and my parents would drop me off in the morning. We'd stay in the woods all weekend. We only came out for school. We loved pretending we were frontiersmen. We'd build shelters, set traps, practice making fire with sticks, the whole 9 yards. When we got to high school, we had this idea to pull a Stand By Me. This was based on the movie of the same name that had just come out. The idea was to walk the railroad tracks out in the country. But instead of looking for a dead body, we wanted to find cool bridges to fish from and camp a little ways off the tracks. Of course, we knew this was dangerous and we'd likely be trespassing, but we were kids. We had a lot of fun. We found beautiful rivers, discovered bridges no one went to, fished and hid from trains. At night, we camped in woods just near the tracks and made small hidden fires. Nothing bad ever happened. It was idyllic. In fact, it was so fun that we did it multiple times. We never had a problem. After high school, Joe and I went our own ways. We both left home but always stayed in touch and tried to coordinate visits so we'd see each other occasionally. One summer in the mid-1990s, it worked out that we were both in town for about a week. We did stuff with family in the day, and at night we either caught drinks at a bar or sat outside Joe's house around a fire and talked about the old days. One night Joe and I got to talking about our Stand By Me trips. Well, nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix. Soon we decided to take a day, walk the rails, camp one night, and walk home. The day came and we started out early in the morning. We had my wife drop us off at our old spot where we used to start, right outside our hometown. She thought this was absolutely crazy and made sure to mention it. When she pulled away, Joe suggested that instead of walking the usual route, we'd take the opposite direction just to be adventurous. We knew the land well and we had a map, so I said, "What the hell?" And off we went. The day went fine. It was fun and a little sad, but in a good way. We found a bridge and sat on the edge, smoked a joint and moved on. We had no fishing gear, but we brought some canned food and other supplies. Before night started to set in, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick, forested area, with trees on every side of the train tracks, so you felt like you were in a tunnel. We had brought small hammocks to sleep on, but before we set them up, we decided to do a little scouting of the perimeter. Now, this is what we used to do in the old days, too. We'd walk the area around a little bit to make sure some dude's house wasn't just over a hill and we were actually camping in their yard. We walked maybe 100 or so feet into the woods and up a small incline. We figured if we didn't see anything from the top of this short hill, we'd be fine. But when we got to the top, we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. It was barely visible. We pondered what to do. We both assumed it was a sugar shack or something, because there didn't appear to be a clear road into it. From where we were, there didn't look to be anyone in it either. All was quiet. No movement could be seen. No lights. We decided to walk a little closer just to make sure. We came down the hill very slowly, and as we neared the building we saw it wasn't a sugar shack at all. It was an old church. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was a squat, sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from years of moss and rot. A cross still stood on top of the place, also weathered black. None of the windows had glass and there were no doors, just open doorways. We got close enough to see inside. There were rows of pews and a built-up section in front for a preacher to stand on. We didn't go all the way in, we didn't want to. Beyond all that, there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no paths, no roads. It was an abandoned church. We left immediately and went back up the hill to our spot we had picked to camp. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still a little uneasy. We chalked it up to the natural creepiness that seeing a church in the middle of the woods would cause. Besides, at this point it was dusk, and we just decided to rig up our hammocks, go to sleep, and move on early in the morning. Night set in, and as we lay in our hammocks and talked, we began to hear something in the direction of the church. Our conversation about it went a little like this. "Do you hear that? What the hell is that? It sounds like people singing." And it did sound just like singing. We both slid right out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two and the singing continued, but it wasn't getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill and see if we could spy where the sound was coming from. We could still move very quietly in the woods from the old days. It was second nature to us. The moon was barely out, but provided enough light so we wouldn't walk right into a tree. It was near pitch black. We didn't use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw a light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together and had a hushed conversation that boiled down to, "Can you believe this crap?" The light looked like candlelight from the way it flickered, and though we tried, we couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer. We had about a football field length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit and then it stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the life out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you see in movies, but again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because we couldn't understand a single word. Eventually, it got to where the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that I covered my ears. Then it stopped. At this point, I was just getting ready to say, "Let's get the hell out of here," when Joe put a hand on my shoulder and hissed, "They're coming out." We were far enough away that we couldn't make them out really well. But what we could see was a line of figures walking out the open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights. They began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move toward us in the hill. We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our stuff, and ran to the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had come from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically, like whoever was holding them was shaking them. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights and came to a road. By our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down it. So we walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife to come get us. My wife and other friends all just thought it was kids messing around. But I heard those voices, and they sure as hell didn't sound like kids to me. Not sure who those people were, but it was definitely the creepiest thing that happened to me out in the woods. I live in a thickly wooded area with dense undergrowth in Washington state. I love it. I love nature, I love hiking, and I absolutely love the sky at night. You can see satellites. There are a few houses nearby, although for the most part, it is nothing but unlit twisting road for miles. My boyfriend and I have a tradition. Once a month on the clearest nights, we go out and walk maybe a couple hundred yards down the side of the road to this one trail that leads up to a mostly abandoned railroad and station. When I say station, I am talking about a big shack with 3 open walls and some benches. We lay out on the tracks and look at the stars. Last night I had him over. Before he got here, I had my bedroom window open and was lying down when I heard rustling in the forest and behind my house. Now, this is not unusual. We have lots of deer out here, so I ignored it. It got louder and closer and continued for a good 15 minutes before stopping. Deer are not that loud unless they are running, and this was all right beyond my window. It was odd, but I'm not afraid of much. There are no cougars, wolves, or bears ever spotted here. The worst we have are coyotes, and unless you feed them, they will generally tuck their tails and run at the sight of a person. Also, even if there was something more out there, my window is on the 2nd floor of a split-level home, and there is a good 12-foot drop before the land slopes up to a sort of ridge. Beyond that is forest. The ridge is level with my window and about 10 feet away horizontally. Anyway, I put that out of my mind and listened to some music while waiting for Tom to get here. His friend dropped him off, and we went out, but because of my current condition, we only went to the clearing near the end of my gravel driveway. He said he heard some major rustling on the walk up, but probably just animals. We went out with flashlights, and there was a long, consistent drip trail down, about a third of the entire driveway and out over the road, as though a leaky car had pulled into my driveway or something wet was dragged down it. Tom's friend only pulled to the side of the road to drop him off. It might be unrelated, but I still do not have an explanation based on what I know, considering I padlock a steel cable across the entrance of the driveway when not coming or going. Ideas are welcome there. The same rustling in the trees on the same side of the driveway as the house started up almost as soon as we got to the end of the driveway. Just the wind right, animals totally. Then footsteps, heavy thumping footfalls from the other side of the road. Bipedal, human, an entirely different direction from the other sounds. We both shone our lights across toward it and saw a person disappear into the brush. Tom yelled at him something like, "If you come near us, I'll kill you." And we very quickly decided to go indoors. We started back toward the house and another person sprinted out from behind my house, then across the driveway all of 20 feet in front of us. He went in the direction of a creek that divides my property from the neighbors. Keep in mind it was now past midnight and we were beyond freaked out. We went inside, locked every door and window, and woke up my roommate, who was the actual owner of the house. He called into the nearest police station and reported suspicious people trespassing on our property at night. I have yet to hear any follow-up on that. One thing is for sure, I am not going out after dark unless absolutely necessary.